What's going on, world? Coming at you guys again. We got another quick video. Personal belongings during search and seizure or arrest. Let's talk about it. So, I was just on TikTok and I saw a video talking about how when an American citizen is arrested, the police officer or officers or law enforcement officers have the capacity to not only detain the individual but also arrest the individual based on the suspicion of a crime, and during so have the eligibility to seize their phone or take their phone. Now, most often, most crimes don't have anything to do with a person's phone. And even after the case is over, most often the prosecution or the police, whoever has the phone in custody, refuses to give it back over. There's always an issue with reclaiming items that have been seized after a trial is over, even though they're no longer being utilized. There's a governing conspiracy as to why the criminal justice system, to include police officers or law enforcement or the prosecution, wants to maintain possession or take hold and maintain hold of your property. And that's what I want to talk about today. If you're an individual whom unfortunately has come into contact with law enforcement based off of an investigation of a criminal pursuit, and you find yourself in a situation to where, say, your personal belongings have been seized as well as searched, and whether they had Fourth Amendment, the ability to bypass the Fourth Amendment utilizing a legitimate search warrant or not, it still calls into question the necessity of maintaining and keeping legal items, not illegal, but legal items after the judgment, the summary judgment, whether you were found guilty or not guilty. And that also goes into play to individuals who find themselves in a position to where, say, unfortunately, you have been convicted and you end up in jail, which I believe is a year or less, and prison, which is greater than a year or more. Now, it is already understood that most incarceration facilities are not located in the proximity or geographical location of high residential areas or in close proximity to major forms of transportation. And when you are incarcerated, whether for a year or less or a year or more, if you do work inside of these jails or prisons, the amount of money in which you will actually save is minute. It is very minuscule. It is not something that you could really utilize when you get out to give yourself a foundation or a platform moving forward, so that when you have fulfilled the penalty or sanction or punishment in which the jury or judge has put upon you, well, unfortunately, you're right back into the same situation of being destitute, which means that now, once again, you are likely between a rock and a hard place, which means you have the possibility of being, unfortunately, a threat to society again, based off of your ability to assimilate and adapt and adopt whatever time frame has changed, because from when you went in to when you got out, it's definitely a different day. So it calls into question the movement in which I've been speaking about for reforming and changing the criminal justice system to include the statute of limitations being extended for individuals who have their constitutional and civil rights violated to where it's more than 2 years, to where we talked about transitioning incarceration into have a more modernized approach for implementing rehabilitation instead of just incarceration primarily. And I also want to talk about today is the ability for individuals whom have their lives interrupted based off of actions, whether uh, guilty or innocent, but they find themselves in a situation to where they have to serve some form of time, whether again jail or prison, that they need the ability to have something that they can utilize in order to start their life over. And from the way it stands right now, again, most law enforcement or prosecution refuses to give legal items of the individual that was prosecuted back to the individual, and items in which an individual takes with them when they are incarcerated by jail or by prison most often gets lost or thrown out. So, the reality of the situation is we need to modernize the practice to make sure that Americans are safe, not only from other Americans, but from themselves. So, if we have the capacity to support artificial intelligence centers facilitating billions of gallons of water every day, and as well as all the rest of these programs in which we have to help support the poor and impoverished, there should be a localized, secure facility for inmates, whether jail or prison, for their personal belongings, so that when they get out, they will have a direct access to these items to start their life over again. Because it is not humane, nor is it fair to implement a corrective measure, a punitive measure for an individual for an action in which they have or may have not committed, and then have to start back over on the premise of having absolutely nothing, and the things that they did have are no longer available. Because this does not keep society safe, and this does not teach the lesson that the country in which imposed sanctions or restrictions against the American for making an immoral or an illegal act is forgiving you for your actions and having the capacity in order for you to start over, right? So, it's said in the Bible, you turn the other cheek. 2 wrongs don't make a right, right? And so as we continuously move forward, this is another notion that needs to be added to the executive order, in which I spoke about before, for criminal justice reform, is for allowing individuals whom find themselves incarcerated, whether for a year or less or a year or more, the capacity to house some forms of amenities, whether some minimalistic amounts of clothes or finances or assets in which they can be secured and regained for control and possession upon their release, to give them a better chance and opportunity not to fall victim to recidivism and committing another crime because they don't have the capacity to assimilate, adopt, or it just isn't any type of resource available for them. So, again, I've said this before, it's time to change the narrative. It's time to change the system. It's time to bring America into a more modernized society. And it's time we looked at all Americans as the people and not just the state prosecutors or the federal prosecutors when they write up and they type up legalese formats to where they represent the people. Because at the end of the day, we are one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So as we continuously move forward, these are the things that we have to keep in mind.